of the Space Shuttle program in the midst of an economic downturn in 2011 was a huge blow to Brevard County. But in the last 7 years, we've seen our area grow and thrive with companies such as Blue Origin and Embraer moving into our area. Attracting new high-paying jobs isn't easy, and the Economic Development Commission of Florida's Space Coast has dedicated itself to luring more companies here. I'm Isadora Rangel, and this is Eye on Brevard. Today, we're going to learn from EDC's CEO, Linda Weatherman, how we have beaten competition for new businesses and how we can assure whether economic incentives work. Watch. Linda, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with, what is the Economic Development Commission of Florida's Space Coast?
Well, we're a nonprofit organization governed by a board of directors where our job is to mitigate upcoming economic challenges by helping our existing industrial base, relocating companies into the area by expanding our industrial base. It's not unusual. There's probably about 5,000 EDOs in the continental U.S. Competing for jobs every day. We have a lot of programs that are tied to what can we do to enhance and bring resources and opportunities to our existing manufacturers, because those have the biggest drivers of our economy.
So let's talk about what has happened since the end of the shuttle program in 2011 until now, 2018. What have we seen? Unemployment rates have gone down.
Yeah.
Can you give us some numbers that show the progress we've made?
I sure can, but I think that the story that we need to talk about, first of all, is that all the work that was in preparation for it. Now, there's a lot of EDCs that, you have an incoming disaster, and you can prep and not always get out of it. It's a number of factors that allow you to get out of it. We were preparing from the day they announced a new vision for space exploration, and then the recession came on top of it. But if you look at the success of EDC with our partners, including the counties and the cities and our state organizations, from 2010 to 2017, 8,100 jobs, about 7,300 jobs retained, but the most important figure is $1.6 billion of capital investment. Construction activity is the biggest impact on the economy, $1.6 billion. If you remember in the recession, we talked about economic stimulus. Now, if you correlate for that same time period from 2010 to 2017, in 2010, we had 11.8 unemployment rate, and it was shooting up. 7 years later, 3.4% unemployment rate. So there isn't I can't say a statistical correlation between the two, but when you look at the activity, and particularly the construction activity of $1.6 billion over 7 years, and you see the unemployment rate changing, we as a community should be very proud of what we've accomplished.
And I've always wondered what goes behind the scenes in terms of attracting and convincing companies to come in here, because you and I talked about this, but you go down to the nitty-gritty, such as utilities and permit processes. I mean, what does it take?
First of all, we have to understand how fiercely competitive corporate relocation is. What community wouldn't want 100 jobs, or, for example, in Project Magellan, north of Grumman, which community in the United States, in the world, wouldn't want 1,800 jobs paying $100,000 a year with a $500 million capital investment? That can change the future of a county. So it's fiercely competitive, but the best way to look at it is almost like an inverted triangle. They look at all data, and then it's a process of elimination, down and down. What don't you have in your community, or what do you have that I'm concerned about that I can eliminate you? And you look at everywhere from the cost of doing business, not just today, but for the life cycle of that product, transportation network systems, not just the availability of labor, but the quality of labor, and that's becoming more and more important. Facilities that are available. Also, which helps us too, is that we do have a lot of manufacturers in our area, over 500, and companies that come in want to know that they have that infrastructure manufacturers. Should they have a broken part of tooling and equipment they may need replaced, they're not having to ship it off out of state, that we have the infrastructure, what I refer to as the intellectual infrastructure in the area. So there's about 5 or 6 what we refer to as competitive advantages. Depending on the company, depends on the priority of those.
And one of the things that companies are looking for are incentives and,
yes,
and tax breaks. And I think that's where you got to make a really strong case for what you do here. And we've seen in the legislature a lot of debate over whether incentives are just a waste of taxpayer dollars. What is the case that you make for incentives, and how do you measure return on investment here?
First of all, every EDC, and we have done this for over 20 years, every EDC needs to run an ROI on their project. We use the in-plan model. That's an economic modeling program for impact analysis. This is the in-plan model that's used in state. I believe it's used in the Supreme Court to determine impact of a company on a certain case. And in that, we find out, we determine the impact of that project on the GDP. And it could be 1 to 5 or 1 to 8, and highest sometimes 1 to 10. For every dollar invested, local dollars invested, you get 10 back on the GDP. So we have that for every project. Now, the determination of the degree of an incentive, I can give you 2 examples, and both on the state and on the local level. On the state level, we have a program, not to get into the weeds too much, but it's called Qualified Target Industry Program. And basically it says that the state will provide, I believe it's $3,000 to $7,000, there's a range there, per job that will go in a trust fund that a company can draw upon and pay off taxes. The determination of that 3 versus 7 depends on how much money they're going to pay. If they're going to pay equal to the state of Florida, they'll get the minimum. If they're going to pay more than the state of Florida average wage, they'll get more. So that's the degree. If you're going to bring more jobs in, if you're going to pay more, then your savings will be more. If you look at the local level, another example is at the local level, we have an ad valorem tax abatement program. It's a county program. It was voted in 1994, 2004, and 2014. And it goes to show that this community understands the importance of manufacturing. And basically what it does is, in fact, the EDC developed the guidelines. The statute says you can give 100%, 10 years for new improvements. And the ED said in 1994, that's not how we should do it. It should be calibrated on how many jobs, the demand of capital investment, and the wages. And so the more savings you get for your AVT, that means the bigger the capital investment.
And so I think one of the most recent tax abatements that the county has given was for MG Foods Inc., which is a food manufacturing plant, and they're expected to create jobs paying between $12 and $17 an hour. How do you measure like this company really deserves a tax abatement?
Well, first of all, they didn't get the full savings. That's a classic example of how we use the AVT. I believe they got 60% for 5 years. I don't know, but I will tell you again, where the statute allows, the ordinance allows 100% for 10 years, they didn't get the full amount, and the reason they didn't get the full amount is because the wages. But there's still jobs we want to have. They still make the requirements that are reflective in the ordinance for getting these. A lot of other communities might have just gotten the whole thing. This is still a competitive job. And when it comes to jobs, well, we get excited about talking about Blue Origin and systems integration from Northrop Grumman, and I think that's great. I couldn't have those jobs. I'm not capable of having those jobs. But there are jobs for everyone. When this company came here, they had to do a deep analysis of the availability of labor, and they wouldn't choose this place if they didn't think they can get the people hired. So there's people who need those jobs.
So now let's talk about your biggest success stories. You mentioned the Magellan project. Explain what that is and what it did.
Yeah, let me talk about 3 projects if I can, because again, it's not the only projects we worked on, but they're so wonderful in regards to having an economic impact on our economy. In 2013, we worked Project Blue, and that basically was Northrop Grumman's Manned Aircraft Design Center. 1,000 jobs, about $75,000 a year, about a $61 million capital investment, if I remember correctly, 2013. Usually get one of those, and that's great. The next year, 2014, we got the next project, and when we got the project, talk about, we got an RFP. We had no idea what company this was. And it winds up being, that was Project Magellan. That was where they're doing advanced technology systems integration development. 1,800 jobs, $100,000 a year, $500 million capital investment. The following year, the orbital launch vehicle we won. That's Blue Origin. 330 jobs, about $89,000 a year, about a $200 million capital investment. So one of the exciting things that this community has experienced, and again, it's reflected in our economy right now, is the projects that come in and the capital investment. I just rattled off almost a little under $1 billion of capital investment. So, these projects that are relocating into the area, they're very sought after, they're very competitive. We're very happy and pleased to get them. It's because we worked with our community partners. I have a very good, aggressive staff. But we can never forget about the existing companies too. A lot of the EDCs tend to forget that. Because the day Blue Origin comes here, the next day it's an existing company. And if we want to work to have more companies relocate, or if Blue Origin or Northrop Grumman or any other company chooses to add more jobs, they're going to remember the relationship we had with them after the announcement, or as we say, after the honeymoon is over. So we are very consistent about having a strong manufacturing program, existing manufacturing program as well.
And let's talk about Blue Origin. When are they going to open? When are those jobs going to be filled? Because that's another thing you need to. Do they need to stay on schedule in terms of when those jobs will become available? And
yeah, and when you talk about jobs that are announced, obviously you're going to build the building. It's going to take time. Sometimes it's 3 to 4 years over the course. They're about a third into their job creation right now. The building, I think it will be in about 6 months. Again, it's going to do design work and manufacturing, so there's a lot of work they have to do there. But they're about a third into the job creation, and that they're on par and on calibration with all the programs that we've aligned with them.
And Blue Origin, which is the company founded by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, they're getting a $8 million incentive from the county, which the county is borrowing the money for. In that case, how do you measure this is how much money you deserve? And this is why this company needs that extra amount of
exactly.
cash.
Well, first of all, if you look at corporate relocation and you look at, and that was all that was offered on the local, $8 million for a about a 600,000 square foot facility, over $200 million capital investment, 330 jobs, paying $89,000 a year is a pretty good deal. But we did run those GDP numbers, and it was about, for every dollar, in fact, I have it here in front of me, for every dollar invested as an incentive, getting about $75.9 million contributed to the GDP in an area. So that's a win. It was highly competitive, and if we didn't offer the incentives we did, along with other things that were offered in this area in regards to having the labor in the area, making a strong case that this is the future for commercial space, we need it here, they were looking all over the Southeast.
And you're competing with Volusia County, right? Were you to the kind of the finalists there?
Yeah.
I remember there was a lot of competition going on.
Well, it was not just Volusia County. It was Alabama. It was Georgia. It was South Carolina. They were looking all over the Southeast. I think they were even looking into Texas as well. Texas has a very robust incentive program. Again, incentives don't play the major focus, as quality of life doesn't either, but it plays a role. And for us to be able to come out and say incentives are important would be very naive on our part, but it's not the only driving factor. Mississippi has historically had, I went to school there, studied economic development. They've had tremendous, they started industrial revenue bonds in 1936. That doesn't mean all companies are going to Mississippi. So it's always a blended factor, like anything in business development. So we're very excited, but we're not done yet. This is, we haven't even seen the diversification taking place, although it is happening. For example, you talked about Blue Origin. That's the orbital launch vehicle. OneWeb is the satellites that will go on that. RUAG, a Swiss company that will build parts that will go on the facility, on the satellite, that will go on the orbital launch vehicle that will now be launched out of here. That is what you want. That is a sweet spot of economic development where you get that true diversification. We're excited about the launch manifest we have coming up, but we need to go beyond that. And now's the time to go out and tell our story that we want to capture all the other related commercial space activity, as well as aerospace and defense.
So we've recently ran a story. It was an interview with a woman who works in the tech industry, and she said the Space Coast is the next Silicon Valley. I'm kind of excited, but worried about that. And I want to know if you agree with that, and do we want to be like Silicon Valley? Because otherwise, a lot of people cannot afford to live in Silicon Valley. I think that's the concern here. But do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I'd like to look at it this way. I mean, one of the benefits that we have is that we can look back and see where communities did right with economic development and where communities probably did wrong. And I think what we need to be able to do is Silicon Valley is nice, I think we're going to, it might be a different, Silicon Valley was tied to a lot of R&D and stuff. We have more of a manufacturing presence than Silicon Valley as a whole. We'll certainly see the jobs, the number of jobs, the quality of jobs in the area reflective of a Silicon Valley. I think it will be far more diversified, but we also need to be sensitive to those shortcomings, and you're talking about the cost of living. Right now, our housing income is increasing. A lot of that has to do with, if you remember, we had a housing inventory that was booming, and then the recession hit. and it stopped cold dead. But our economic development success didn't. So we had housing plateauing and going down and not building any homes. You had the economic dynamics. That's going to readjust itself, and I think you'll see that readjusted a little bit later. But that's something we certainly need to be sensitive to. We also need to understand that what's required in the community might be things otherwise in the past we didn't. We want to look at, again, quality of life issues. That's why the EDC, one of the things that we do, it is not recognized so much, is we interface a lot with the millennial groups, because we want to hear what they have to say about this community. I mean, you and young people are going to be going out. It's going to be your future in this county. And one of the things that we found is, of the millennials we surveyed, and we did a survey, and I'm happy to share it, 80% love it when they're here. They like the recreation, they like the quality of life, but they particularly like the job opportunities. Yeah. And that's the key that we need to look at. And 60% of those that we surveyed chose to live here.
Yeah, and we're talking about all these high-paying jobs that require very skilled workers. What is the challenge in attracting people to move here from elsewhere in the country? And then how do you sell Brevard to these kids who are looking for jobs all over the country?
Yeah, there's two sides of the coin. And the first side of the coin, let's look at, there's the attraction of talent, and then there's the growing of workforce from within. Let's talk about the attraction of talent first. We have a talent attraction program. That's basically what you designed. It's called a Live Big campaign, and we are competing. We're competing against when kids go out and they go to, particularly engineering kids, when they go out, looking at Austin and California and places, and Nashville now is a hot spot. So we have to tell our story to these students the same way we tell our story to corporate America. And it's, the Live Big campaign is you could live big in a small town. So we're embracing the scalability of this area. And it's not just beaches, but think about a place in the United States that has 21st century technology, from Blue Origins to Northrop Grumman's to all kinds of other exciting companies. They're going to be the future of America on a beach in an affordable place to live. A place where you're not just going to be a young person, you're going to have a family. And what a wonderful place with the river. Show me those combinations. But it's a competition, so we got to continue telling that story. And I'm excited because we're also doing this as a co-venture with the TDC as well. I would ask your readers, there's a book, it's very easy to read, but it's called The Coming Job War, and it's by Jim Clifton. Very easy to read that, and you understand what not just this EDC faces, but what this nation faces as a global competition for talent.
Can you explain what we're facing here?
Well, basically, the demand of talent is exceeding the supply of talent. So we want to make sure we tell our story. The other thing that we're competing against, too, is let's look at the creating workforce from within. We lost a generation of people going into manufacturing. It's probably a lot of my generation. We went, first generation, someone getting a degree, and you wanted to get involved into white-collar world. My grandmother was a cigar roller in Ybor City, and God, I didn't want to grow up to do that. But what's happened is, because of that, we've lost a generation. Also, 55% of the people in manufacturing are going to retire, who are 45 years or older. So in about easily 10 to 15 years, 55% are going to retire because they're 45 years or older. This is not a negative to Brevard County. This is reflective of our country and reflective of the state of Florida. So what the EDC is doing, and we have a program, we calibrate it with our manufacturers. It's not like we do these things in a vacuum. We have for 20 years, over 20 years, met with our manufacturers, and we said, look, we have this idea. What do you think? It's not just because it's an idea of Linda makes it great. And they calibrate it, and it's a program, and I do want to talk a little bit about it.
Which is a CPT program?
Exactly, and I think that's the future. That will keep us competitive. And basically what it's doing is two parts. It's creating an entry-level certification. We didn't create the certification. It's taught at Eastern Florida. We're promoting it. It's part of the National Association of Manufacturers. So someone who's interested in getting into manufacturing, we say, here's a pathway for you. And after that, we can build upon your certifications. But at the same time, we're also having a marketing campaign called See Manufacturing Through New Eyes. Because what we have to do is we have to counter that archaic notion of manufacturer being old and dirty and everything like that. We haven't released this yet, but we just finished a study. And it's one thing about the EDC, we're very analytical in our approach. We want to understand what we're getting into. I think it was 800 parents in the school system. And of that, we asked them, what do you think about manufacturing? And again, they think it's dangerous and dirty, so we need to counter that. But if you ask, what do you want your children to do? They want to get them into a STEM field. They want upward mobility, and they want it to pay well. Every one of those things can be said in manufacturing, even if you do the entry level. So we've now have trained over, it's a new program, there's no EDC in the nation doing this, 150 students. We need to have 350, 450, 850, 87% placement in a job in manufacturing. If you want to get a job in manufacturing, call the EDC, we can make it happen. These companies are clamoring for these students now.
But financially, does it make sense to, let's say, forego getting a bachelor's degree to get a manufacturing job? What is the starting pay, and what is the highest that I could earn? In that field?
Well, it goes anywhere. The average manufacturing salary, I think, is it's about 49,000 to maybe 55,000. But the beauty about manufacturing, I don't want to oversell it in regards. If you go into an entry-level job, let's say you make $17 an hour, and you get a CPT, you easily become a precision welder and make 89K, 110K a year. This manufacturing has what I call the food chain of opportunities. In fact, some of these students that have embarked on the CPT program have organically come back to us and say, that's great, now I need to learn to do soldering. And that's what happens. So you can go and easily make $70,000, $80,000 a year in 5 or 6 years going into manufacturing, have zero debt, and do your training and with school debt. So it's a good program. And again, one of the things that we have to do, this country, we need to recognize and embrace manufacturing. That's why these students that go into the CPT program, we don't just give them the program, give them the scholarship. We just say, look, you can have this. The EDC will pay through a state grant that we have, but here's what you need to do. 3 times you have got to, and we'll organize it, walk through a manufacturing facility.
And there is a push nationally for more kids to go into blue-collar jobs, and actually we just ran a column by Adam Putnam, who's running for governor, saying, don't just get a bachelor's degree just for the sake of it. But I find it very hard. I mean, is there a target audience for this? I mean, I understand some kids who have been taught their whole lives that they got to go to college. I mean, how do you change their minds?
There's a number of ways, but look, I do want to point out, if I don't mind, the EDC's been saying this for over 5 years. Okay, everyone else.
Adam Putnam is.
It's one of our jobs. We have to mitigate problems. That's a prime example of it. But luckily, we did it 5 years ago because now it's catching on. But it wasn't easy. It took a long time for us to even convince our manufacturers this is the right thing to do. Because I think we saw the stats before our manufacturers were down there building the products. We're not looking at the age ratio where we do that because we are analytical geeks. No, it's a campaign. It's getting people, it's getting teachers, it's getting guidance counselors, it's getting parents to walk through Embraer and look at it and say what a beautiful place it is. To walk through other manufacturers, and not just the Blue Origins, but the small, medium-sized manufacturers that you can go in and be part of a family. The kind of students that have chosen to get a CPT and worked in manufacturing, most of them never worked in manufacturing before. And they're from young girls. In fact, if you go to our web, Space Coast EDC, we purposely did that. We did a vignette of individuals and where they worked. And you'll see they're all kinds of ages and everything like that. So anybody can go into it. From people that their kids have just grown up and they don't want to work at maybe a 9 to 5. They want flexible time. They want to make more money. They want to get more skills. Going into young people coming out of high school and kind of finding their way around and deciding that's something they need to do. So it's like anything. I equate it to what we had to do, and I told my board of directors, it's like the U.S. Army in the 70s. I mean, they made a strong case. It was the war ended. There was no draft. They had to make a campaign to show how you can prove your life. And I feel very strongly you can prove your life going into manufacturing, and you can make a good, honest living. And we need to do it. And 5 years from now, we're going to look back, and it's going to be our biggest competitive advantage.
And we have 3 minutes left, but I want you to talk about some of the rhetoric we've heard coming from the county commission, in particular Commissioner John Tobias, who he's not shy about his opposition to the EDC.
Yes.
And the county gives $1.4 million to the EDC every year, and he's against it. I think the argument, and I'm putting this in a nutshell, is that the county itself can do what the EDC does. And I feel like, is it your job kind of to defend the EDC every budget year to continue that funding? And how do you tell this is why we're better than just letting the county handle everything?
Well, first of all, if we just talked about these major companies that would relocate. They won't talk to a public agency. It's highly competitive. That's why we have statutes that protect our files. Think about anybody, if you have 10 people and you're going to relocate, or you had 10,000 people, you can't. That's competitive data that you need to keep confidential until you make that decision. There's reasons for it. Number one. Number two, every year we're held accountable. We talk about the number of jobs. There's not many EDCs that we have that in the height of the recession, this EDC said, we're going to commit to making so many jobs and working with companies. There's not an EDC. As I told my board, that was the smartest, stupidest thing we ever did. And we met it. So I don't mind being held up. We should be. We have a contract with the county. We're going to be held accountable, and we don't mind being held accountable at all. And I just explained over 10 years how we basically, working with our partners, went from 11.8 unemployment rate to 3.4% unemployment rate. That's almost unheard of. It's structurally changing the economy. That's what we're held up to, and I'm proud of what the EDC work, and we don't mind those questions at all. It's rightly so.
And last year, Commissioner Tobias pushed for more transparency of how the EDC is making some of its expenditures. What have you done to comply with his request so far?
Well, first of all, we need to understand too that the EDC, for every year that we had a county grant, we execute on our terms. By our terms, I say we proactively wanted a audit. So we provided an audit, and we gave that to the county commission every year for the last 20 years. In this case, Commissioner Tobias wanted some more information broken down. We're happy to comply it. I think we submitted our information a month ago, broken it down, and it's tied to the public dollars that are used, and we don't have an issue with that. We understand if that's what is needed to help a further understanding of what we do. But we do want certainly the viewers to understand too that we're a public-private partnership. We're able to do the work we do because we leverage the dollars, by the county dollars, with private sector funds as well.
Linda, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much. I love talking about the EDC, and we should be so excited and proud what this community has accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. My thanks to Linda for joining me in the studio. If you have questions, you can email me at irangel@floridatoday.com. And be sure to join us again next week, right here on WEFS and FloridaToday.com. Thank you.